Hi, welcome to yet another extensive playthrough, and this time it's of HARLEQUIN'S CONTEXT by Shakmat Modular. I've had this module for a couple of weeks now, and I think I've gotten a good enough understanding of it to be able to explain the full functionality of this really versatile module. For starters, I want to thank François from Shakmat Modular for supporting this video, and this is yet another Belgian maker that really makes high quality stuff. The knobs feel really sturdy, the buttons are really responsive, and overall this really feels like a sturdy module that won't break easily. HARLEQUIN'S Context is conceptualized as sort of a theater piece consisting of 4 acts with 4 scenes. So in total there's 16 scenes grouped into 4 acts. Every scene consists of one setting for these knobs. All the 4 knobs can have different settings, and to keep the analogy going, I really would address these as actors or players that play out a scene, and in the next scene they might have different roles. You can set these roles for each knob individually, and they can be different in the next scene. The scenes are grouped in an act. As I said, in every act there's 4 scenes. You can select these scenes at the bottom here, and there's several knob combinations to get into the menus, but these menus are just 1 layer deep. Let's listen to some patches I made with HARLEQUIN'S Context, and then I will give you a thorough run-through of all the features of this module. Let's have a look at the features of Harlequin's context. For now we're just listening to a saw wave coming from even VCO. It's patched through filter 8. I'm using the 4-pole low pass output here, and this is going into my mix BX. Let's connect channel A of Harlequin's context to the filter cutoff on filter 8, and let's just explore what we can do with Harlequin's context. Now when you reset or clear everything, Harlequin's context knobs and outputs revert back to just being an offset. Let me close the filter here manually. To change the behavior of this knob and output, you can change the role of each of these knobs. But let's just stick to channel A for the moment. To change what channel A does, you need to change the role. To get in the roles, you need to press Function and the Role knob here. As you might notice, there's a blinking light here now, and this indicates that whenever we change the role, using the plus and minus buttons here, we will be changing the role of channel 4. You can step through the channels using the store knob, and this is one of those knob combinations or knob functions that you really need to memorize. So when we're in the menu for the roles, pressing the store knob just switches between the channels. So I want to change the role of channel 1. We can do this by pressing the minus and plus buttons here. The first role is just an offset, which I showed you just a minute ago. This offset goes from 0 to 5 volts. When we switch to the next role, this is a bipolar offset which goes between minus 5 volts and plus 5 volts. And the next one is an inverted version of the first one. It goes between 0 and minus 5 volts to the right. From the next roll, we're getting into LFO territory. So the first one, indicated by this symbol, is a saw wave, and we set the speed by turning the knob. And there's the inverse saw wave. Then there's a triangle wave. There's the sine, my favorite. Then there's a square wave. The next one is a stepped random. The next roll, indicated by an F, is a fluid random or smooth random. And for all these LFOs, the knob just controls the speed. The next roll is an envelope, and this envelope needs to be triggered. So I'm just going to use a trigger coming from Pamela's new workout, and you connect this trigger to the input labeled gate in. I had to increase the length of my gate here because the first envelope mode is an AR envelope. And when the gate is too short, it won't reach its maximum. The next roll is just a release envelope. This one also reacts to the length of the gate. Let me increase it. You can hear by adjusting the length of the gate I'm sending in, the behavior of the envelope changes accordingly. This is just like you would connect a gate to the signal input on MATS or the slew input on delta V, instead of just triggering the envelope. Turning the knob to the left decreases the release time of this envelope, and turning it to the right increases it. The next envelope mode is just an attack envelope. For this I need to lengthen my gate again. Now the two next rolls are special rolls called deviate and level. Now these two rolls just look at what the channel before it is doing, and the deviate roll offsets this signal, and the L mode attenuates this signal. To show you how this works, I've selected a sine wave for channel A, and if I then switch to the output of channel B and go to channel B for setting the roll as well, I can choose D or deviate. And as you can hear, this offsets the signal from channel A, so we can still adjust the speed of our sine LFO with channel A. This LFO will still be outputted from the output socket of channel A, but channel B creates an offsetted copy of this LFO here. When we switch to roll L, which is level, this is just attenuation of the LFO. Now we can go one step further. Let's switch to the output of channel C. Let's go to channel C for setting a roll. And by choosing the deviate roll here, not only are we able to set the speed of our LFO manually with the knob of channel A, we can attenuate this LFO with channel B, and by setting channel C to deviate, this just looks at the previous channel, which is channel B, and offsets this signal. So you can create LFOs that you attenuate and offset. And this in itself is, in my opinion, a really useful feature. For example, this is extremely useful when we want to use an LFO to create kind of a pitch sequence. Let me go back to channel A first. Set this to a sample and hold. So I can control the speed of this sample and hold LFO with the knob for channel A. I can attenuate this completely with the knob for channel B. And then I can offset this with channel C. By the way, this is a bipolar offset. It goes from -5 volts to +5 volts of offset. And then of course there's still one channel left that we haven't used, and let's just use this to control the filter. And to get out of this setup mode, we just press function again and we're back. And everything we did here is just one scene of 4 possible scenes in every of the 4 acts. To store this, we press the store knob until an S starts blinking intermittently, and then we press the scene in which we want to save this, but let's just stay on scene 1. To go to a different scene, you just press the knob for that scene. So let's quickly do something else here, because I only connected channel C and D to something. Only these knobs at the moment do anything. But let me try a similar setup from before. So to go over it quickly again, to choose the roles for every knob, you press function and roll. To skip through the different channels, we press the store knob. Now I want to create an envelope. A release envelope. Because the gate is still connected, this envelope will be triggered every time a gate signal is present. I want to be able to attenuate this envelope, and I want to be able to offset the envelope as well. And as you can hear, this gives us a lot of control over the envelope. Please keep in mind that this offset here is bipolar, but it's not an attenuverter. It just offsets whatever signal we have going on before it, below or above 0. Which in this case just influences the pitch of the VCO. Let's go for a square wave for channel D. Let's go out of this setup mode by pressing function. By the way, the green LEDs give some information about what the channels are doing. So this is outputting square wave, and the other channels are all outputting several versions of the same envelope that we control the length of with the knob for channel A. To store this scene, we press the store knob until the S starts blinking, and then we select the scene where we want to store this. So if we then switch back to scene 1, we can hear that all the outputs and the settings for the knobs revert back to what we did before. And we can do this for scene 3 and scene 4 as well. And these 4 scenes are grouped into an act. There's 4 acts in Harlequin's context, which we just select by pressing the act knob and a knob here below. So now we selected act 2. We don't hear anything happening because we first need to select a scene as well. So of course there's nothing programmed inside Act 2, but this is just to show you how to switch between different acts. So now to go back to the second scene we set up in Act 1, you press the Act knob, we press 1 for Act 1, and then we press the 2 for scene 2. And by the way, when you switch to another scene or another act for that matter, sometimes the knob needs to catch up to its previous setting, and if it hasn't catched up yet, you can see that the white LED is not lit. It's not until you turn it to the previously stored value that it lights and it becomes active. So the same is going on channel D. Turning the knob doesn't do anything until you catch up to the previous setting. And this is really cleverly indicated by these LEDs. So you can see turning this knob doesn't change anything. The same for this one. In fact, none of the knobs have catched up. You really need to catch up first to the previous setting to be able to change anything. I've changed up my patch here just to show you that it's not always true that the knobs need to catch up with the previous setting. Channel A is connected to the fault productive input of my VCO, which is now off screen, and channel B is connected to the frequency modulation of my filter. Now I want this channel B to be an LFO, so let's quickly change that. Let me remove the gate for a moment, we'll talk about that behavior later. And now I told you if you want to save this, you press this button until an S appears here, and you press the scene where you want to save this setup. But you can also save this to all the scenes by pressing store first and then pressing 1 and 4 at the same time. This saves the same setup of the 4 knobs to every scene. Now if I change my first scene and I store it, you'll notice that when I change to scene 2, of course the pitch is the same as before. I think this is really self-explanatory, but what I want to show you is, you see that in scene 2, the white LED for the knob here is unlit, and what you can tell from this is that the knob needs to catch up first. This isn't necessarily true, because when you press the store knob and then you turn one of the knobs, it immediately reacts and stores the new value into this scene. So I made some changes to the first 2 channels in the 4 scenes. Let's listen to them separately. Now what you can do with this is send in a gate signal. You'll notice that the LFOs get resetted whenever there is a gate signal. The gate signal, I'll tap it here, it's just like this. You can see that in every scene the LFO is being resetted. Now you can change this by going into sets, but I will show this in a moment. Let's just ignore the resetting LFO for now. What I first want to show you is how you can sequence these 4 scenes. For this you need to go into the sets. When you are done setting up all the scenes of all the acts, there's even more things you can choose on how HARLEQUIN'S CONTEXT behaves to incoming gate and CV signals. This is a global setting and this affects all the scenes and all the acts. There's a cheat sheet delivered with the module that summarizes all the different options there are, and I will just go through a few of them. Now to get into a sequencing behavior, we first need to set this up in the set. To get access to the set menu, we press function and button 4 here, which is labeled set as well. Now sometimes this doesn't react, I don't know why, but okay. Once it starts flashing, you're in the sets, and then you can choose with the plus and minus buttons here what set you want to pick. I'm sure after a while you start knowing from memory which set you want to choose, but when you start using this module, it's really necessary to consult the cheat sheet. Now to get into a sequencing kind of setup, there's several options, but let's choose just a basic sequencer set. To confirm your set setting, you need to press the set button again. And as you can see, we're now sequencing through the 4 scenes in Act 1. Now you can configure the range or the amount of steps that are sequenced or looped by pressing function and the range button here. Now it's set to 4, but you can set it to any amount you want. You can even go beyond 4, and this means that all the 16 scenes grouped into the 4 acts can be sequenced by an external gate or even a CV signal. But let's stick to 4. To exit this, you just press function again. And what we can now do is change the steps while they are happening. Now let's go back to a normal set. Let me show you something else right now. So the gate is still coming in. This resets the LFO. Let me first store this setup to the 4 scenes. So now these 4 scenes have different values for the pitch, but the LFO stays the same. It's just annoying that it resets every time when you switch a scene, and it also resets if it receives a gate signal. Now by choosing a different set in the set menu that offers free LFOs, we can bypass this. And you can now hear that the LFO is free running. For some reason it didn't store my pitch values. It happened before, I don't know why. And now you can of course change the speed of the LFO for every step separately. But if you just want one speed across the whole sequence, you set it while pressing the store button here, and you just wait until every step is passed at least once, to give Harlequin's Context the chance to write this new value into the memory for each scene. And as you can imagine, once you start using all the 4 channels and the 16 scenes all at once, or 12 or 9, whichever amount of steps you want, that things can get really interesting. Now let me show you something else quickly. Let's just set up the basic set here, so no sequencing. Let's remove the gate and let's patch up a saw wave to the CV input. And as you can see, you don't need to set up the sequencing inside the set menu when you send in control voltage. It automatically sequences through the steps according to which voltage you send in, of course. Now this is a unipolar positive LFO, alternating between 0 and 10 volts, and I'm guessing Harlequin's Context only reacts to voltages up to 5 volts, and that's why there's a pause at the end here. Now there's another interesting feature inside the set menu. Some of these sets feature morphing, and what this means is that all the values between all the different knobs and rolls are morphing between the different scenes. So you won't get any sudden jumps, even if channel A in scene 1 is a DC offset and it might be an LFO or an envelope in scene 2. Whenever you select a set with a morph function, these values will gently morph into each other. And I've noticed this behavior is dependent on the speed speed of the LFO or whatever control voltage you use to sequence through the steps. So if you speed this up, the morphing will be faster as well. Now I don't think this is particularly interesting for sending pitch to a VCO, but I think it demonstrates the feature really well. Now there's really a lot of options when it comes to these sets. For example, in set L, you can send in a clock signal into the CV input, and this can be used as a clock divider for the LFOs. So I've sped up my clock, and this is actually a 1-to-1 division or no division at all, and turning this to the left divides the speed of the LFO. So let's store this, and if we now go to the last set, which is set B, you can see that we're sequencing through the steps again. Again, we can set the range with the range function here, and all the functionality we had before when sequencing with a clock signal into the gate input just remains the same, but by using the CV input to clock through a sequence, we can then use the gate input for triggering gates we set up. And since I only set up channel C to be an envelope in scene 1, in the other two scenes, this is just still the offset. So we can do really interesting things with this, but let me disconnect the control voltage once more. Let's store scene 1 to all the scenes by pressing store and then 1 and 4. Let's reconnect the CV. Let's make some pitch adjustments. Now you can see by combining all these different features, you can really create interesting sequences just with Harlequin's context by itself. Of course, you'll need an external clock or gate and some kind of control voltage to make anything happen here, unless you just want to stick to the separate scenes, the separate channels, which already gives you 4 control voltages that you can use as LFOs or randoms, offsets. There's really a lot that you can do with this module, and that is one of the most intimidating things about it, I think. While the manual is relatively complete, it's a little bit hard to get your head around, because all this talk about scenes and acts doesn't really mean anything unless you start discovering on the module itself what they all mean. But I can assure you, if you consult the manual a few times, which really isn't that much considering how much you can do with this module. So if you consult the manual a few times while figuring out the functionality of this module, I'm sure it will all make sense pretty fast. What I forgot to mention is that you can save up to 16 acts in a non-volatile memory here. To save an act, you press the function and the save knob. If you did it right, you'll see that the LED on the second button here starts blinking. This is to indicate that you're in save mode. Then with the plus and minus buttons here, you can choose between one of 16 slots, and to finish saving you need to press save again. If you want to save something and then you change your mind, you just press function again and then you're out. To load an act, you press the function and the load button here. The LED above the load button will start to blink. This indicates that you can choose which of the saved slots you will load. To load, press load again. Of course, nothing's happening because I haven't saved anything else than what we're hearing right now, but I think you get the point. This will be it for this video about Harlequin's Context by Shakmat Modular. If there's still questions about this module, please ask. I think I covered most of the basics. I didn't go through all the different set possibilities, but I think by showing you a few, the rest is pretty self-explanatory. I hope you learned something about Harlequin's Context. If you want to support my channel, you can do so on coffee.com/Pris. There's usually a link in the description somewhere. Many thanks to those who already supported me there. And I've had some really interesting conversations with a few of my supporters over there, which is really cool. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, bye.